Hey and welcome back. And in this lesson, we're going to look at materials inside of Blender. So materials are quite interesting and very fun to work with. So let me show you how you can apply materials to your objects. So first of all, I'm going to delete the camera and the light. So just select those two items, press X and then delete. And then we're going to work with our default cube. So I'm going to zoom in slightly so we have a better view. And then first of all, what we need to do is we need to change over to the material preview mode. So if you look here right at the top, you have your wireframe and then you have your solid view and then you have your material preview. So this is just kind of a view. You can also use the render view, but it's a little bit slower. Even obviously if you're using cycles, it will be a bit slow, but you can use Eevee as well. But for this one, I'm just going to use this material preview mode, which is nice and fast, and you can see your actual materials applied to your object. So I'm going to select our cube, and then here on the right hand side we have all these properties panels. You can go to the one that looks like a little sphere with a red and black checker texture or material on it. So I'm going to click on that, and if you point to that, you'll see that it says material properties, and this is where you're going to do most of your material work. There will be a separate lesson on using the material node editor. So we're not going to get into details about the nodes right away. We're just going to look at the basics of using materials and assigning them and changing colors, etc. And then later on in this course, we're going to go and look at the actual nodes that you can use to create more complicated materials. So first of all, by default, there will be a default material called material. And as you can see, if we scroll down here, you can see the base color and all the different properties of that material. Things like the metallic properties, specular, roughness, and all those different things. So we're going to look at a few of them, not all of them. And then just know that there are different shaders inside of Blender. So if you look at the top here, it says surface. That's our surface shader. And this is the name of that shader, which is Principled BSDF. Now that's kind of the default material that you will use probably most of the time inside of Blender, but just know that there are a few different ones. So if you click here, this will show you all the different types of shaders available in Blender. So you can see there's like a glass BSDF, which is quite nice for using for glass textures or materials. And then there's one specifically made for hair. And we also will find one for volumes that we're going to look at later, this principled volume shader. But for now, we're just going to use the normal principled BSDF shader. So let's start by deleting this default material. So I'm just going to make sure this default material is selected. And this is actually a material, or it's called a material slot. So we're going to remove this material slot to create a new material. And you don't have to do that. I just want to start off kind of with a clean slate so I can explain better how the slots work and how you can assign them to different objects in your scene. So I'm going to click on this minus to remove that material slot. And now you can see we don't have any materials in this area. So first of all, I'm going to start by creating an empty material slot by clicking on this plus. And I can see it gives us a slot, but it doesn't have any material in it. And now we're going to click on new here at the bottom. So this is where you can give it a name. So currently it says material.001. So I'm just going to click there and let's just rename this to something. I'm just going to call this red. And just like that. And you'll see it's going to rename this material slot to red. And now we can go ahead and we can change some of these properties. So first of all, I'm going to change the base color. So you can see currently it's set to white. And I'm simply going to click on this white and it's going to bring up this color wheel. And you can drag around and set the exact color that you want. So I'm just going to set this to red. Something like that. And you can see our cube turned red. So obviously that is working. And then we can go ahead and we can change some of these properties to see what they do. So if I increase metallic, you can see that we will get kind of a more of a metallic look. So we don't really have anything else that's reflecting at the moment. So maybe we need to add a floor, but we can do that in a minute. So just kind of see that is becoming more metallic. And if there was anything next to this object, you would be able to see the reflection. And so I'm going to bring that down a little bit. And then the same with roughness. So roughness is also one of these settings that you will change quite often. So the less the roughness is, if you set this to 0, then we basically have a perfect mirror. So it will be reflecting anything that is close to it. It will reflect that as if it was a mirror. So you can see it's actually reflecting an HDRI that's on by default. If you're using this view, it's just to kind of preview your materials, how reflective they are. So you can see that is quite reflective. And yeah, you can go ahead and you can increase that roughness again. If roughness is set to 1, there will be no reflection at all. So usually that is not very realistic, because any object, even though you think it does not reflect any light, it will reflect a little bit. So never set this to complete 1 or complete 0 unless you have a very specific need to do that. And then there's some other things here. You can also adjust your emission if you want to have this material actually emit some light. You can set this up in here as well. But then there's also a shader that's specifically designed for emission. And this is this emission right there. So you can either use that, or you can set the emission here. You can click on this black and you can increase this to maybe white or blue or any different color. And then you can also set the alpha and some other things around that. But yeah, I will definitely suggest, if you want to use an emission material that's emitting light, to rather use the emission shader. So for now, I'm just going to set this back to black. I don't want it to emit any light. So we have our first material, and it's called red. And let's create a new cube. So I'm just going to move this one off to the side, like so. And then Shift A, Mesh Cube. So we have a new cube. And if we click on this new cube, you can see that it doesn't have any materials assigned to it. So we can now go ahead, we can create a new material slot, like that. And then we can create a new material, or we can assign a material that we already created to this material slot. So if you click on this little drop down right here underneath this little sphere, you'll see that we have 2 materials. So that's our default material and then our red material. So if I click on red, it's actually going to assign that red material we created for this cube. It's going to assign it to this cube's empty slot. And it's going to give it that same name. So now you can go ahead and you can change this. But if you change this, it will change all the objects using or linking to that specific material. As you can see, if I set this to blue, all the objects with that material will change to blue. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to set this back to red. And let's create a new material just for this cube. So I'm going to, with this cube selected, I'm going to click on the plus to create a new material slot, and then I'm going to click new to create a new material, and this one I'm going to name blue. Okay, and now I want to change the base color of that material, so I'm going to click on the white and just change this to a blue color. And now currently you can see this cube is still red because it still has the red material assigned to it. So I want to take this blue material and assign it now to this cube. So very simple to do that. You can either select which one you want to assign right here. So blue I want to assign, and then I'm going to click on this little sphere right here next to blue, and I'm going to drag it out and just drop it on this cube. And now you can see that is active. So let's click on this red cube of ours again, and I'm going to add a new material slot. And now I can say, instead of creating a new material, I can just use this drop down and I can say I want to assign this blue material to this empty slot. So blue like that, and now I can drag this little sphere onto this one to assign that blue material. So let's say we want to add our red material again. So I'm going to create a new slot, select red, and now I can drag that onto that cube again. So it's a little bit confusing how this works, but yeah, you're basically working with material slots, and then you save your material into that slot. Now let's say you want to only assign the material to a specific area of your mesh. You don't want to assign it to the whole material, to the whole mesh. Maybe only want to assign it to different faces. You can do that. So I'm going to move this cube away, just out of the way, and I'm going to create a new cube. So Shift A, Mesh, Cube. And this time I want to maybe apply the red or the blue only to specific faces of this cube. So you can definitely do that. So with this cube selected, let's first create a material slot by clicking on the plus. And then I'm just going to load in the blue material into that one. And maybe let's add another slot. So I'm going to click on the plus and then the drop down and then red. So we have both the red and the blue materials here. We can add the default as well. So let's do plus and let's add the default material, which is just a white material. So let's say we want to apply a red to some of these faces. So with this cube selected, I'm going to go into edit mode. So press tab on the keyboard and then make sure you're in face select mode. So press 3 on the keyboard and then you can select which face you want to assign that material to. So I'm going to select this front face. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to select this red material. And with this face selected, I'm going to click on Assign. And there you can see we've now assigned that red material onto this face. So we can do the same. Let's change this face here at the back. I want to maybe make this white. So I'm going to click on this material, this default material, and then Assign. And you can see, there we go. So let's do one more. Bottom, click on red, Assign. And there you can see we have set those to that. So play around with adding different materials to different objects in your scene. And yeah, we're going to go into more details of adding textures, etc. Later on in this course. This was just kind of an overview of the material properties, how to create new materials, how to create material slots, and how to assign them to either a full mesh or to assign them only to specific parts of that mesh. So practice with this until you are familiar with creating different materials for your objects, and I will see you in the next lesson.